Okay, so I know a lot of you out there have been sending in your requests about iron play, and especially how to make sure you're hitting those irons pure, really compressing the ball and avoiding those chunks and those things that can be so frustrating out on the course. And, well, we heard you.
We did, and luckily you guys sent in some really great stuff from Henrik Jentsch, the golf instructor. We've gone through it, and honestly, I think there's a lot here that can help every golfer, no matter your level, take their iron play to the next level.
Absolutely. So today we're diving deep into Jentsch's data-driven teaching, and what he's really all about is understanding the biomechanics of your swing so that you can find the most effective way to strike the ball consistently. And what I like about his approach is he really emphasizes that it's not about trying to copy someone else's swing. There's no one perfect swing out there. It's about figuring out what your body needs to do to make solid contact.
Yeah, exactly. It's about finding your own swing that works for you. And his work is really fascinating because he uses data from thousands of swings to back up his ideas. And, it's not just theory, it's real-world insights based on what actually happens when the club meets the ball.
Right. And looking at all of his material, we've pulled out 3 key areas that he highlights, and we think these are really the game changers when it comes to consistent iron strikes. So are you ready to get into it?
Absolutely, let's do it.
Awesome. Okay, so the first one, and this is something that I think a lot of golfers might not be paying enough attention to, is shaft lean at impact. So tell us, what exactly is shaft lean and how does it affect our iron shots?
Okay, so shaft lean is all about the angle of your club shaft at the very moment you make contact with the ball. Picture it like this. If the shaft is leaning back towards you, that's considered a positive shaft angle. But what we ideally want with irons is a forward shaft angle, meaning the shaft is leaning towards the target. So basically, imagine your hands being a little bit ahead of the ball at impact.
Gotcha. So it's like you're presenting the club head to the ball with a slight forward press almost.
Exactly. And the reason this is so important is that it helps you to hit down on the ball and compress it against the turf, getting that nice crisp contact that we all want. And what's interesting is that if you look at professional golfers, they almost all have a significant amount of forward shaft lean at impact.
Right, and Jentsch actually gives us some numbers here. He says that on average, male tour pros have a forward shaft lean of negative 29 degrees to negative 16 degrees at impact, and for women, it's between negative 24 and negative 12 degrees. So, I mean, that's a noticeable lean.
Yeah, it really is. And it just goes to show how crucial this is for hitting those solid iron shots.
Yeah.
So for those of you listening who have access to a 3D Pro subscription, Jens recommends checking out the Shaft FO Angle Tracker, which can give you some great data on your own shaft lean at impact.
Nice. And even if you don't have those fancy tools, you can still get a sense of this in your swing. Just pay attention to where your hands are in relation to the ball at impact. Are they slightly ahead or are they behind? If they're behind, you might need to work on getting that forward shaft lean.
Yeah, exactly. Just being aware of it can make a big difference. Now, moving on to the second key element Jentsch talks about is something he calls the sway gap. And this one is kind of interesting because it involves understanding how your hips and chest move during your swing.
Yeah, the sway gap sounds kind of mysterious. I'm curious to hear more about it. So what exactly is it and why is it so important for hitting good iron shots?
All right, so let's start with pelvis sway, which is basically just the forward movement of your hips towards the target during your swing.
Yeah.
And Jentsch points out that a little bit of pelvis sway is totally normal. In fact, even tour players do it. But the key is the relationship between your chest and your pelvis at impact. And that's where the sway gap comes in.
Okay, so the sway gap is all about how those two parts of your body are positioned relative to each other at the moment of truth.
Yeah, exactly. Now, a negative sway gap means that your chest is staying a little bit behind your pelvis as your hips move forward. So think of it like your belt buckle is leading the charge towards the target while your chest stays more centered or even a touchback. And this might sound counterintuitive, but this separation between your chest and hips is what allows you to really strike down on the ball effectively while still swinging along a good path.
So it's almost like you're creating this kind of downward angle of attack by letting your hips move forward while your chest stays back. Is that right?
Yeah, you got it. And if you can master this negative sway gap, it can really be the magic formula for hitting those powerful compressed iron shots. And again, if you have the 3D Pro subscription, you can check out the at IMP indicators and specifically look at the metrics for pelvis sway and sway gap. That'll give you some real data on how you're doing in this area.
Awesome. So let's move on to the third and final key area that Jentsch talks about. And this one is all about the kinematic sequence of your downswing and specifically the role of your pelvis and chest. And he calls this pelvis lead. So break this down for us. What's happening here?
So the kinematic sequence is basically just a fancy way of saying how different parts of your body rotate in relation to each other during your swing. And what Jentsch emphasizes is that elite players consistently show more pelvis turn than chest turn at impact. So basically, the lower body is starting the downswing and leading the way through the hitting zone.
So it's kind of like your hips are firing first and then your chest follows.
Yep, that's a good way to put it. And the reason this is so important is that if your chest gets ahead of your pelvis, it throws off the whole sequence and often leads to a steep downswing that comes in from out to in. And that's when you start seeing those thin shots or those chunks where you hit the ground before the ball.
So it's almost like you're trying to hit the ball with your upper body instead of letting your lower body lead the way.
Exactly, and it's a common mistake that a lot of golfers make. But if you can focus on getting that pelvis leading the downswing, you'll be in a much better position to hit those solid iron shots. Now, again, if you have the 3D Pro subscription, the @IMP indicators can show you your chest turn and pelvis turn numbers so you can really see how you're doing.
Fantastic. So basically what we've learned from Henrik Jentsch's research is that there are 3 key things to focus on for better iron play. Number 1, forward shaft, lean at impact. Number 2, a negative sway gap where your chest stays back as your hips move forward. And number 3, making sure your pelvis is leading your chest as you swing down.
That's a great summary. And, it's important to remember that these 3 elements are all connected. They work together to create a swing that's powerful, efficient, and consistent. So if you're struggling with your iron play, it might be helpful to think about which of these areas could use some improvement.
Yeah, I think that's a great takeaway for our listeners. So as you head out to the range this week, I want you to think about these 3 key concepts and pay attention to what your body's doing during your swing. Are you getting that forward shaft lean? Is your chest staying behind your pelvis? Are your hips leading the way? If you can start to incorporate these principles into your swing, I guarantee you'll see a difference in your iron play.
I completely agree. And, even without all the fancy tech and data, just being aware of these things can make a big difference. Sometimes it's just about having that mental image in your mind as you swing and focusing on the feel of the movement.
Absolutely. Well, this has been a fantastic deep dive into the world of iron play, and I think we've uncovered some really valuable insights from Henrik Jentsch's work. So thanks for joining us, and keep those irons sharp out there.
You got a good luck with your game.
And for those of you listening, how are you going to take these concepts from the driving range to the course? How will you adapt your practice to focus on shaft lean, sway gap, and pelvis lead? We'd love to hear about your experience.
Yeah. Let us know.
Yeah.
And until next time, happy golfing.